Welcome back to Mayo Clinic Radio. I'm Dr. Tom Shives.
And I'm Tracy McCrae.
Tracy, have you ever felt obliged to visit an elderly relative or a friend, but you really were sort of reluctant to do it? You dreaded the small talk. You didn't know what you were going to say.
True.
And once you talk about family and the weather, you sort of run out of something to say, and you feel a little awkward, and likely so does the person that you're going to visit.
Potentially.
Yeah, and that's the experience our guests today encountered in their own lives until they found a better way to spend time with the elderly by striking up meaningful conversations.
I love it. Why didn't I think of this?
Well, you could have written a book too.
I could have. They have written a new book to share exactly how to do just that, and it is called If Only You Would Ask, and it offers 42 topics and over 400 questions that can spark memories and help the elderly to share their own story. No more struggling to carry on conversation with an elderly relative or friend. I'm not looking at you when I said that, Dr. Shives. Joining us in studio are the co-authors of the new book, mother-daughter duo, Eileen Opatz Berger and Joan Berger Bachman. Welcome both of you to the program. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Well, thank you. We're happy to be here.
Eileen and Joan, so nice to have you. Now, we have had a chance to peruse the book, and by the way, it's wonderful, and I see the ratings on Amazon, 5-star, and we're going to tell people how they're able to get the book later on in the program. But tell us, Joan, about the experience of visiting your father-in-law, Bill, during the end of his life.
Well, my father-in-law passed away 5 years ago, and at that time, he had decided he was going to live in his home. He wanted to stay there until the end of his life. And so it was in the middle of a long, cold winter. And from Rochester, it was a drive that I thought I should make at least once a week.
Being the good daughter-in-law
being the
that
good
you
daughter-in-law
are,
that I am, and because I loved him. But I would get to his house, and, after the hugs, we'd sit down at the kitchen table, and I'd tell him about what I'd been doing and what the children were doing and maybe what I had for lunch. And so what's he been doing? Well, as the weeks went on, his life was getting smaller and smaller, and he'd spend hours at the kitchen table looking out the window and talk about, there were rabbits out there. But the perfect truth was there was less and less to talk about. And after an hour or so, I'd kind of look at my watch and think, well, I better head back. And I'd give him a hug and say, you hang in there, Bill, and we'll see you soon. And so it wasn't long after I commiserated with my mom that, oh my, those visits to Bill were getting painful. And I just really didn't know what to talk about. And he had so little to share because he wasn't getting out anymore. And so before I went the next time, Mom put together a notebook filled with questions. And she said, take this with you and ask him some of these questions. And she said, and then you might want to leave it on the counter for the grandchildren. They might find it useful. And I thought, well, all right. And had it with me. And the next time I went to see Bill, I did have the notebook, but it was too late. We had kind of missed our window of opportunity where he was able to have an in-depth conversation about much of anything, and
well, so
that's
but
the end of the story.
Moms know best, don't they? So Eileen, how did you come up with this list?
Well, I belong to an organization called AAUW in Arizona, and it's an umbrella organization that encompasses lots of different interest groups. Well, one of the interest groups happened to be something called Memories into Memoirs. Each month we would meet and a topic would be picked. And so the small group of about 10 members would write an essay about that particular topic. Well, after 20 years of belonging to this group, I had quite a list of topics. And so I thought to myself, well, maybe Joan would benefit. I'll dig out those topics and come up with some questions, and maybe that'll make it a little more enjoyable. And that's kind of how I came up with this idea about what to talk about.
Eileen, is this your first book?
Well, yes, in a sense, it's my first book. I have written 5 family histories. Wow. And so it's the first book, but it's the first kind of, the other books were strictly for family members. And so when Joan expressed an interest, and after Bill had died, we got together and we said, there's got to be thousands of people like Bill. I mean, alone or in a retirement home that maybe they don't have many visitors, and no matter how good they are in a retirement home, and I'd say most of them are, there's always room for a little enrichment, stimulation. And so we thought, gosh, why don't we think about putting
Writing
together a book that would address this, and maybe that'll be the answer. And so then Joan thought, gosh, let's do it. And so
You're such a smart daughter, don't you?
Yeah, right.
So how long did it take you to put it together?
So it's been about 5 years, and it was time to have the baby this last month. And we would work on this. There wasn't really a time limit. We'd work on it when we were together, and there have been many iterations of, well, what questions should we include? And
So it took you about a year or
it
so?
took about 5 years. Well,
5 years.
It's been a process.
Yeah.
It's been a process to come up with perfection. It doesn't happen overnight.
So,
Right.
but
and
how
we
does
kept changing it, and then we'd say, well, maybe this topic isn't that meaningful. Or we'd say, well, what about how we're going to set it together?
Yeah, how does this work? Do you
how
just
do we-
open up
okay, Joan, and
do you
you
just
tell them.
page through and then stop and then ask
Okay.
that question?
So the beauty of the book is that you can pick up the book and you can open it up to any page. As you mentioned earlier, there are 42 topics and some 400 questions, and each topic is divided into a little section that includes a hook question. And so the hook question is bold and in a box, and this might be all you need to spark a conversation. So for example, I'm going to open the book and I'm looking at topic 10, which is dating. And the hook says, what was the hardest part about dating?
And then there's 9 other
And
questions.
And that
then
might be
you
enough
might
to get it
just
going.
talk about
Sure.
the hook. But if you need a little more assistance, then there are follow-ups. At what age did you start dating? How did you meet the people you dated? How did your parents feel about this? And no matter your age, everybody, I would think, would have some opinion about their own dating experience. But if not, you can just open the book to another chapter, another topic.
Let's talk about
and
something else.
And talk
Right,
about
right,
something
right.
else.
Yeah.
It should not be stressful. It should not be invasive. The point is not to put anybody on the spot. And
So you take this book with you. Can you take it with you to the nursing home or the wherever? Yeah.
You take it with you, and you can choose to give it to the person with whom you are visiting, because we all know that sometimes we might be asked a question and can't think of an answer at that moment, but then later that evening you think, oh, I could have said that, or I wish I had said that. And if I have a lot of downtime during the day, I could spend time with the book and, well, what would I say if someone asked me?
So, Eileen, we have to wrap things up here, but I am struck with the idea that, you get this and leave it with the elderly person, with the adult, but I've got teenagers, and I think this book would be invaluable for them. How to speak to adults in
Right,
their
right,
life.
right.
Mm-hmm.
And we think it would be a wonderful bonding with the grandchildren. So often young people think, when you get a certain age, how dull is that? They certainly aren't doing anything very well. They don't even think to ask, do they? I mean, they just, I don't know what they think, but
Well,
they never ask. And everybody has a story. In our Minnesota humility, we'll say, oh, I've never done anything very unusual or, well, but everybody has had their ups and their downs and their challenges and good things and wisdom, and I hope wisdom. And so maybe this book, even if you wouldn't take the book to visit your grandmother or grandfather, the fact that you looked through it
Might be good.
trigger something. And maybe you have a little story about
I don't know if you
Jimmy.
wanna wrap it up.
We need to wrap it up, but go ahead and tell me
One
the
last
story.
thing. My son-in-law was with us over the holidays, and of course, the book was on the counter, and he kind of was looking through it, and yeah, I thought that was interesting. And then it just was interesting because the next day he went and spent an afternoon with his grandmother, who lives in a senior facility. And my daughter commented that, gee, Jimmy really asked her some good questions. And then I said to him, well,
Yeah.
did that have anything to do with the fact, and he didn't have the book, did that have anything to do with the fact that you had just looked at the book? And he looked right at me and he said, yeah, I guess it did.
I guess so. How can
Pretty.
people get their own copy of If Only You Would Ask?
Yeah, because it's obvious a lot of people need this. We just need to know how to get it.
Oh, in fact, we keep thinking like activity directors in retirement homes. What a natural that would be, or a small group therapy.
Oh, she's
or
good.
Yeah.
Clergy,
She's good.
or
That's just about everybody, isn't
caregiver,
it?
Personal caregivers.
And by the way, mine is autographed, and if you're lucky, they'll autograph yours too.
But
Before
it
they
is
leave.
available on Amazon Prime. You'll get free shipping. You can get it at Barnes & Noble online.
And you've got a website, right?
We have a website,
IfOnlyYouWouldAsk.com.
Yeah, you have to remember that title, If Only You Would Ask, because everybody has a story if you ask the right questions.
Perfect. Eileen, Opatz, Berger, and Joan Berger Bachman, you're the best. Thanks so much for being here. Love the book.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.